welcome to the latest episode of Elixirr Digital's mini-series that is focused on AI within the world of digital. Today we will be discussing the topic of AI in search or GEO. I am Brad, I'm a digital marketing consultant within Elixirr Digital, and I have with me Rob, who is a digital manager and specialises in SEO. We've actually both returned fresh from Brighton SEO, which was really interesting. Unsurprisingly, the dominant topic was GEO. Lots of talks going on, lots of different providers discussing all the different elements of GEO, and the exhibition was just full of tools and different agencies that are also focused on GEO. So today we're going to be trying to answer some of the questions that we hear most from our clients. So what exactly is GEO? What does that mean in practical terms? And how should we be thinking about AI in search and planning for the future? So the first question that I certainly get asked most is what's the correct term? There's lots and lots of different acronyms from GEO, LLMO, etc. Rob, perhaps you could shed some light on what's the right term.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different acronyms out there and ways of describing AI work, and they all do have different uses or different meanings. So yeah, there's AEO, for example, which is Answer Engine Optimization. So that is about optimizing content so it's surfaced by answer engines like voice assistants, so Alexa, for example. LLMO, so Large Language Model Optimization, so focuses specifically on optimizing content so it's easily interpreted and referenced by ChatGPT or Gemini, things like that. AIO or SEO, so broader terms that are used by people sometimes for AI-driven results. But the one that we tend to use and what we focus on is GEO, so Generative Engine Optimisation. And this is really focusing on how a website is optimized so that it can appear as a source or cited in ChatGPT and things like that. So how when users start to ask their questions, the aim is that our brands and our clients and our websites are used as ways to provide answers to those users, with the hope that that maybe they'll be clicked through to the website.
Makes sense.
Yeah, there's loads of different ways, Brad, and I think our focus is really on GEO.
And I imagine at some stage, some of those terms will probably fall by the wayside, and perhaps we'll end up focusing on just one, and there'll be one kind of dominant term, although there's obvious nuances between them.
Yeah, and I think so, and it really depends on the person's need as well. So if you're the Alexa answer engine optimization, for example, that isn't going to apply to every brand or every website, and that really doesn't lead towards any site traffic. Because obviously at the moment there's no way of if you ask your Alexa a question, you then can't go to a website. So that would be maybe an e-commerce focus or something like that. So I think it really depends on the client need. And obviously for us, GEO is the big deal because we still have websites and we still have a place for the traffic to go and then leads to be coming from those websites. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then so a question for me is outside of doing GEO, and also we have SEO as well because that's a big thing that we do. But what are your thoughts on where people should start to focus their budgets, and is it GEO, is it SEO? What are your thoughts, Brad?
Okay, that's definitely a great question and one that I've had a lot. I think first and foremost, SEO is still really, really important. Google is 90% of search. It's still a major channel. I don't see that changing largely, but I would say that if we had focused on the dominant search engine when I first started in digital marketing and SEO, we would have put all of our eggs in one basket, and that would have been AOL, and we know how that ended up. So I think we need to future-proof. We need to think about the evolution of search and where it might be heading. And I think when we think about digital marketing and putting a strategy together, we look at where are our customers, and the top 5 sites. First and foremost, we have Google, we have a strategy, we have Google Ads, we have SEO, we have YouTube again. There's ways that within a digital marketing strategy, we're going to include YouTube and we're going to reach customers on YouTube. Facebook, Instagram, again, we've got social ads, organic social strategies. We're finding a way of connecting with our customers on the top 4 platforms. Now, number 5 is ChatGPT. So it's really important already that we start to think about how we can get our brands in front of our customers, because they are on ChatGPT. And I think if we think about again the evolution of search, Google right now, the default answer is the traditional 10 links, and it's about ranking in position 1 within those. But you would have seen that obviously we have AI mode. So Google itself, the future of or the default search result is likely to eventually be an AI uh, overview of some sort, or an AI summary of those answers. So yes, it is really important, and the clients who have budgets that permit, um, they are already ring fencing separate budgets, and they are focused on GEO. And I mean, the quality of traffic that's coming through, if you think about traditional search and the customer journey within traditional search, it just, what LLMs do is they just accelerate that journey. So whereas traditional search, you'd start with one of those broad terms, and then you're going to start to narrow. You're going to start to use long tail terms, and you're going to narrow your search as you're reading different pages. You're going to narrow your search, and by the time you're on those long tail terms, you have a really good idea of what you're looking for, and you're a warm lead. Within LLMs, that can happen in one session. So you can have a conversation, you can quickly get to that result. So yeah, again, quality of traffic's really high. Now I would say there's obviously some similarities with SEO, and some of the work that we do for SEO will help. But what does GEO look like in practice? I mean, you're hands on. What would that look like for clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so one of the things I'll quickly add to what you've just said there, Brad, is really interesting in that it's almost like ChatGPT or whatever does all the heavy lifting for, before the people come to the website, whereas typically in search we have, a term. Yeah, it could be a top level term, it could be, real basic term, and then all the heavy lifting is done by the user in the search results, and then they're expected to do more when they go to the website. Yeah, but in ChatGPT, they are, or other platforms, they are doing all their heavy lifting in a conversation. They don't realise it's necessarily happening, and then when they go through, we're seeing some good results. So in practice for GEO, one of the things that we're seeing is that the conversion rates for users that do come through is really high, and we're aware that that's not necessarily the goal of ChatGPT and Gemini and things like that. So that's something to be conscious of. That the goal of it is not necessarily to drive users to the website, but those users that are going through to the website are looking pretty good, and they are likely to convert. So it is a strong channel. In terms of what we're seeing, so there's a variety of different strategies that we're discussing with clients. So some are much bigger brands, so their presence in chat, for example, is already pretty strong. So they've already got good perception and good share of voice and things like that across chat. They're recognised as a strong brand, and the platforms know that they can source them and they can rely on the information. We have other brands that might be a little bit smaller or might be in a more competitive market. So the strategy will change for those. Right now, our approach is to benchmark performance, understand what's happening, understand what they're appearing for, and then taking it from there. So having a real detailed report, or research analysis of what the performance is, what good looks like, where the opportunities are, and then taking it from there, and then coming up with strategies for whether it may be looking at adding authors to a website so that we position ourselves as experts and getting people across the websites, or whether it's structured data, looking at log files. There's loads of different things that we do. Some of it's really technical, some of it's on page. So we still go back to those pillars of SEO, but it's almost as if GEO is becoming its own pillar. So there's a fourth pillar that we're looking at, and the tactics and the methods are similar, but the outcome and the KPIs are different. So we know that it's almost as if the ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever it is becoming its own kind of client. and we're looking at how we manage that. So we've got a variety of different strategies.
Is it fair to say that it's still very much a test and learn approach?
Yeah,
We
definitely. Yeah, I mean,
we
so
don't have all the answers, perhaps.
yeah, and so one of the biggest things that we don't have at the moment, which is the biggest thing in the industry really, is that we don't have any like original data. So we don't have a GA4 or anything like that. We don't have any search volumes. We don't have any of the tools telling us where the information is or
Got it.
what people are clicking on and things like that. And that means that there's a lot of test and learn for what types of prompts people will actually use in search. And obviously then we don't necessarily know. So like one of the things that come up from Brighton is if you appear after there's 10 questions, do you get any accreditation for that in the tools and the platforms and things like that? So one of the things that we're looking at doing and looking at for our clients is, where can we impact change? So do we take pages that are ranking really well in traditional search and then seeing how they appear in chat, seeing pages that appear in chat, how do they rank? And if we make small changes, so if we add FAQs or if we add authors to pages that don't perform well in chat, do we then see some performance increase in other platforms or anything like that? So it's very much we're kind of making our own best practice stuff. So the stuff that we have for SEO at the moment, we know we've been doing it for years, and we know best practice, and we know what we can try, and we know typically what doesn't work, and what the industry's moved away from. But at the moment, we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of trial and error for people not really understanding what will work and what won't work. So there's a lot of trial and stuff.
What you're saying is a lot of the traditional SEO activity will get you so far, but there's activity outside of traditional SEO that you have to undertake, and a lot of that is test and learn to understand how you can rank higher or be mentioned more.
Yeah, and the biggest way to look at it is, I think the KPIs are different. So the KPI of traditional search is driving users from a search engine where you appear as position 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be, to your website, and then the website works for you. Whereas the KPI for chat or any other platform is very different in that we don't see the conversation, we just know they come to the website. So I guess for you, Brad, I wonder, with that in mind, with the KPIs being different, how would you see us measuring GEO success in the future?
Okay, yes, it's another really good question. I think whenever we put together any kind of strategy, whether that's a channel strategy or a digital marketing strategy, we put in place a KPI framework, and that traditionally will have a number of different metrics. So you've got soft metrics that are early indicators of success, right through to harder metrics that are business outcomes or impact metrics. So that same principle would apply to GEO. And perhaps some of the metrics around SEO are also relevant for LLMs, but there's differences as we know, and as you've sort of touched upon, in terms of kind of what success might look like. There's being cited within LLMs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be clicked through. You're cited as a source of the overall or the overview, and actually we've seen that being mentioned more within that overview could drive more traffic or sales than actually being a citation, because you're more visible. And those citations, your landing page could be cited there. You could also be cited by a third party. So there could be a YouTube link or a Reddit link, and that could be driving the overview. So we have to think about citations, we have to think about brand mentions, and measuring those are difficult as well, because you touched upon the fact that we don't have real data. In terms of traditional SEO search, we can go into Google and we can get keywords, we can get the volume, we can understand what keywords our customers are searching. That doesn't work for LLMs at the minute. There's no API, there's no way to scrape real data. So first and foremost, we need to think about, okay, if we're thinking about those early metrics, those early indicators, and those soft metrics, we're thinking about visibility. We need to think, what terms and prompts do we want to appear for? So what are the prompts? We don't have a tool, right? We don't have a tool to tell us the prompts. What we can do is we can use Google, we can use Google Ads, and we can do our original keyword research. We can use LLMs to suggest prompts that we might want to appear for. We can also, in the same way that we would apply to a content strategy, we could ask our product teams, our commercial teams, our customer service teams, what questions are our clients typically asking around our products and services? And that is likely to be, to a certain degree, the types of prompts that might be within LLMs. So once we have identified what our prompts might be, obviously looking at soft metrics, so are we visible? Are we cited? Are there brand mentions? When we're talked about, is it accurate? Is the sentiment good? These are all early indicators of a successful LLM strategy. Of course, business impact, these don't change considerably. ROI, leads, share of voice potentially within LLMs compared to competitors. That's in the same way that you look at brand awareness. They're all, I think that's a sensible way to think about GEO and how how we can measure the impact of our strategy. I've touched on some of the tools and the limitations, and of course within Brighton SEO, I mean, we were just blown away by how many tools there were that were there at the exhibition. We were walking around, and there must have been 30 stands, of which most were tools. And we've spoken to a lot in the team. Maybe you could give us a bit of an overview of what we've learned so far and what the tools are that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely there's been some growth. So we're seeing a lot of new tools coming out of the addition of Geo and things like that. So there's a lot of tools that previously weren't around, but there's also a lot of tools that are now adding AI services to their existing platforms. So we have we use SEMrush, and that has capabilities that we are able to use for our clients. So we're already doing this. There's other tools out there which they gather data slightly differently, or they talk about the performance slightly differently. Most of them all cover the same perception and things like that. So how well a brand is perceived. So that's a good point that you've made there, Brad, about we don't necessarily know what the prompts are. So you can say, you can go to a platform and ask it how you perform for a specific search term, but there's no guarantee that is a prompt that anyone's ever going to use. And there was a good example that came from Brighton where, once a user starts including their own unique circumstances, or where they're from, or anything like that in the chat or the prompt, that becomes something that is impossible to predict, because we can't say what that will be, and that's likely the reason, or one of the reasons I think why we don't have data coming from the platforms, because there's so much of it that it's really hard to give specific performance for exact prompts. And I think it will if we do get data, it will likely be bucketed into topics.
Yes.
So one of the things that we're seeing is that the tools that we have access to, they create an idea of how you perform. So that's where we're using the tools at the moment, and that's where we're coming from. So we're able to say, we don't know if these prompts will be asked, but we can get an idea of the topics that will be asked. And at the moment, you have 80% share of voice and 81% perception, against the competitors that the tools pull out. So they're really good, and we are exploring the market for other tools. We're not just accepting what we've got. So there's loads of different ways of doing it. Yeah, go on, Brad.
For sure. Oh, sorry. I was I was only going to say, I mean, there was a couple of tools we've come across that I think were interesting, where we're saying you can't get prompt data because there's no API, there's no way to scrape that from within the LLMs. But I think the tools that we've been on a lot of calls together as we've assessed the market, and we've talked to lots of tools, and lots of tools had lots of investments. And I think there's been a couple of interesting ones in there where they're making claims that they have real user data, and they have an opt-in. They have a big number of devices where they have opt-in information, so they can get real life prompts. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But it's a bold claim, and it's interesting. But I think for us, as you say, we've looked at a lot of tools, but I don't think right now it's moving so quickly. It's almost, which one do we commit to? Because in 12 months' time, this could look totally different, couldn't it?
I mean, yeah, the growth in the area in the industry is we saw this sort of growth for Google, right? So there were bits coming from, or there was data coming from Google many years ago where only 15% of the queries that were coming out had been used before. So everything was
Wow.
essentially new, and that's kind of what we're at now. So the growth is massive, and I think where we're looking at these tools that are creating their own prompts and saying that they've got prompt data. So we'd like to challenge things, as you know, Brad, and we're challenging these platforms to say,
Yeah.
where is this data coming from? And the answers we get back are sometimes unclear. So we go into that tool knowing that we're not sure, where this prompt's coming from. But that is the only method we have right now of doing that kind of work. But
Yeah.
we just make sure that we are asking questions and challenging things and not just taking stuff at face value. And then when we have our conversations with clients, we say, look, this is the best idea that we have at the moment. It isn't
Yeah.
gospel, it's not necessarily the truth, but it gives us a good idea of how performance is. So that's kind of where we come at it from.
Totally, and I think it boils back to again that point of our clients should know their customers. They should have a good idea of what types of questions they might be asking around a product and a service, and if you can harness the knowledge of your team and create content that answers as you would with traditional SEO, that answers the needs of your customers, then that's the first step, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's a good that's a good approach overall, definitely.
yeah. I
Um,
think there's so, and the other important thing that we do, I think, which is is important to us, is we don't take recommendations from these platforms at face value. So we will challenge those recommendations to see that the final outcome or output from those tools,
yep,
is it relevant, is it useful. We have seen some examples where the tool is recommending that we make new products and new services, and that's not
sure.
necessarily like a good outcome. So we're making sure that anything that we do get from these AI tools or platforms goes through the humans to work out how good that recommendation is. So that's something that people need to be mindful of.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's a nice way to end things. Of course, we mentioned at the start we have another session that's due. In that session, we will have Christian, and he will be taking a bit more of a deeper dive into GEO and showing some sort of hands-on work that we do. So I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Cheers, guys.